So both times I was in public, and both times I was invited. I felt very welcomed. I was curious to get to know more people, to share my hopes and dreams, my fears, who I've been, who I'd hoped to become, what I hope and hoped for others. And both times I ended up being puppeteered, being betrayed, being taken advantage of. One time I was 11 years old. It was actually the age I last played on this Little League field in my hometown, Santa Clara, California. Little League baseball, that is. Those of you who may not know this configuration behind me. I used to play basketball over there too with my buddies. The sport I would play more of. After what happened to me at that wedding in India in 1990 by that uncle who I just recently learned used to be a friend of my father's. Wow. Makes the feeling of it happening again, but in a different way, feel even worse. As I've been realizing in recent weeks, and having dreams about and talking about in therapy and writing about and starting to share with the world. One of the other main times was in 2019. I was invited to get an award by my alma mater, of all places. Not the one down the street from here, Santa Clara High School. High school, class of 97, go Bruins. UC Irvine, which, if many of you don't know, it's also UCI, or the University of California at Irvine, which is hundreds of miles or kilometers south of here in Orange County. See if people don't know. Close to Disneyland, and between Los Angeles and San Diego. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Go Warriors, go A's, go Sharks. Silicon Valley, all your gadgets. North of here, San Francisco, and Oakland, the town. And so I've been decades of wanting or not wanting to talk about these things, or knowing that I could, or that I knew how, or that, if that makes sense for people who are survivors of traumas like sexual assault, racist attacks, and being manipulated when you're getting an award for social justice, and then you ask to be heard and for your communities to be honored properly, and then they give a promise, and then they don't meet the promise to make it up to you, but then they do something else that they think is really nice, I would imagine, but it actually magnifies the silencing, and it brings back really painful memories of that sexual abuse from when you were 11 and you last played Little League baseball over here, and would start shooting more hoops over there. I don't want to turn the camera. There's some people playing ball right now. I just want to respect. It's a weekday here. K through 12, they're all in school today. Santa Clara Unified School District, like I used to be back in the day. I've gone over in my head so many times how I would do this. And I also realized, okay, if I write about this, which I have started to, and some people have seen some really, really confidential, rough drafts, whatever ends up in my memoir or in other interviews or panel discussions or, advocacy, I realize it's time for me to just kind of say it. Here, people ask, what happened? Do they mean that thing when I was 11 with that uncle? Do they mean when I was 4 in Maine? I'll get to that. Cranium cracked, survived, wouldn't have been there to be abused by that uncle at 11 in India, or to be invited to get an award for social justice in STEM from my engineering alma mater, UC Irvine, and then to be manipulated and re-traumatized and gaslighted and all these things. It's kind of an amazing thing just to say, if I hadn't survived that one thing early in my life, I wouldn't have been alive to face those other things. Now, that's not the way I generally view my life's through line, is like, bad, trauma to trauma to trauma to trauma. But sometimes, for trying to heal, for trying to look at something, we may need to take that perspective. It's not healthy to always have that kind of through line, but if that's where you are with your traumas, I don't blame you. It can be a hard thing to get out of, especially if it's been drilled into you, if others have reinforced it, or if it's what you needed to survive. It's not necessarily better or worse than saying, oh, I just look on the good side of life, and I'm grateful for everything, and I have this wonderful memory, and this wonderful memory, and this achievement, and these people helped me. And I have those in my life, and I talk about them often. For my filmmaker friends, you're probably like, okay, this is deep, but, lighting, sir, lighting, make those, make it pop or whatever. I don't know, I'm just trying to capture some things here. Selfie stick, I guess, and Bluetooth. And so realizing more and more in the last few weeks that when I was sexually abused, and so I'm gonna now, just to anybody who this might be difficult to hear, if you have connections to such a trauma, I feel for you, or if maybe it unearths things for you or people that don't quite realize, I'm sending my love and my patience. For people who know me, if this is about to be real, like, whoa, you're actually going to tell the exact thing, and I don't have to. In this instance, I need to, because of what is mirrored 3 years ago, while I'm getting an award for social justice in STEM from my engineering alma mater at their Engineering Hall of Fame. I mean, it's nice they talked about my acting and my teaching and, being, helping my family, and me being this guy when I was at UC Irvine with giving graduation speeches and, being a homecoming king and all that, which sounds like so privileged and really joyful too, compared to these things I'm talking about, but it's a big part of my life. I'm very proud of it. A lot of dear friends. I mean, UC Irvine, another reason why this is so painful and hard for me to talk about is, UC Irvine, you were my haven. Even though this is so beautiful here, this area, the Bay Area, Santa Clara, my upbringing, a lot of great friends, a lot of wonderful aspects to my parents, a lot of challenges, my wonderful younger sister. I didn't apply to any colleges or universities in the Bay Area, even though of course it has some great ones, high UC Berkeley, high Stanford. I don't know if I'll ever go to graduate school, but maybe you'll get your chance. But I didn't apply to any of you because I had to get away to have some sort of semblance that I could be me and have a life outside of just all the dysfunction and the, having to grow up quickly and lead at such a young age for the family kind of thing. But clearly I ended up picking a university not too far away by car or by airplane, just down the freeway. Okay, several hours, 1 hour flight. But that's a big deal because I also applied to some schools back east. And there was even another school in Southern California, right, that I almost just picked. It came down to 1 day's difference. Trivia for any of you out there, if you know those other 3 schools I applied to. and yeah, thankfully got into those three plus UC Irvine, and UC Irvine, of course, right now, one of the top cool schools in the country, in the world, on these lists, and great for the American dream, and top 50 public universities, and all these, say, generally well-earned distinctions, while the university being lauded for its diversity, equity, inclusion, and its outreach, and its advocacy, and its promises after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and movement to fight anti-blackness and to support LGBTQ plus people and women and so many different people, communities, ecosystems, species. That's what makes this, I think, much more. It should be easy. It's like, okay, you then are promising to look out. Oh, you're also giving awards for people who advocate for those things, especially in STEM, right? Where we still need to hear more about how to social justice in STEM. Okay, we're hearing more in the pandemic. Tragic reasons why more people are now aware of scientific racism and eugenics and vaccine equity. We need that global vaccine equity. Environmental injustice. Climate change, climate crisis. Thankfully, we got some rain, and thankfully it's a day with decent air quality, or I would have my face covered just for that. Pneumonia for 2 weeks when I was 5 in Maine. All these things happened before my sister was born. Cracked on the head by that racist bully who yells the N-word at me and says something like poo boy or chocolate boy or poo face, in addition to, the N-word. But, he really wanted my red sled in July of 1984, that day. He really wanted it, apparently. Needed to use Kit from Knight Rider. I mean, that show was, that's, when you're a kid, that song is so rad, right? Like, dun 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 dun, dun, little car. I noticed that I had to kind of heal from that by listening to the narration in the theme song. I know season 1 there wasn't a narration, but seasons 2, 3, 4 about the lead character Michael Knight. He looks out for the downtrodden and justice, and it's like, oh my gosh, did I internalize that? As well as, of course, turning to, as many of you know, my beloved Star Trek, right? Mr. Spock. How do you deal with being different and being picked on and almost dying from attacks by racists and trying to find your identity? You're not American enough. You're not Indian enough. And we'll get to that with the thing in India when I was 11. It's the other side of it, right? Can't be at home here in America. Can't be at home back in the homeland, India. Is California the haven? Well, it had its own issues too. It's not like it was perfect here. Had bullies around here too. Some of my friends I'm still friends with, you weren't always so nice. Some of the white folks particularly. But we had some of that horizontal hostility we had to navigate. And when it's the early 90s and other side of the city by Santa Clara University, there's Bookser Middle School. And actually that word Bookser, that name, is going to come up with it's connected to the sexual abuse thing. I know, triggers. I'm not doing the best job of warning folks, hey, trigger. But when I get into that one part, I'll remind you, for anyone out there who's watching this who's like, but just tell me already what happened. Whether you're referring to, age 11, that wedding in India, sexual abuse, or that UC Irvine award thing. I'm not trying to be defiant and not just say the thing. Clearly it's traumatizing, but I also don't think it's the point. If we're trying to sort of say, will there be accountability? But I did see the invitation for the reunion and homecoming, so thank you to the UC Irvine Alumni Association. Overall, you've been great these last 3 years. You were one of the first folks I came to say the horrible stuff that happened at my UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame. The very next day, while you invited me to do like a homecoming royalty reunion, homecoming monarchs trivia, monarchs. Give me cold weather. I know, California, climate crisis. I'm complaining about like almost 50 degrees. It's relatively warm. I get it. It's Fahrenheit for the international community. You know, it was called the Campus-Wide Honors Program back in the day, Campus-Wide Honors Collegium at UC Irvine. Always love, you know, why did I pick UC Irvine and not those other universities I was accepted into? Came down to the honors program. I mean, I was at UCLA the day before with my family. It's like, UCLA! Oh, everyone's like, you're going to pick UCLA, right? You love sports, LA, you kind of, you know, got that feel, that style. And I thought I was. And then I go to UC Irvine. I didn't know much about it. Back in the 90s in the Bay Area, I didn't know as many people who knew as much about it. Coming up, the reputation wasn't quite there nationally, globally. But, you know, you all at UC Irvine, especially the honors program, you made me feel so welcome. And that it wasn't just, here's the offer of, you know, a full scholarship and this, it was like this really cool housing options, and I can cook for myself in these like artistic and nerdy and holistic communities, and something a little more quiet that I think I ended up needing given what dysfunction, you know, I had back home. By the way, over there, if any of you have heard me talk about like foreclosure, bankruptcy, you know, in my family in the 90s, that condo is actually just over there. And then those apartments with evictions and the hoarding thing of my dad. And I've now publicly, I think recently on a social media post, one of those apartments is down there. That's 2001. But it was 1990 to 95 that we lived in this condo over here. Really special time. You know, my parents, my sister and I, not many people get to have, especially these days, right, the cost of things. And so I don't take that for granted. But, you know, when you're a kid and you have chaos and dysfunction and understandable, too, like you're also feeling for your parents while there are these sort of mistakes happening. You know, they grew up in another land, they didn't have as many choices, and they were arranged, and they probably should have been arranged to different people, or not at all. If they had choices to choose or not choose, like they gifted to my sister and me respectively, I know then I might not exist. Okay, I would love to go back in time to, if I could make my parents each happier, but does that mean then my sister doesn't exist? Well, I wouldn't have that, and she wouldn't have that, and her fiance and all my sister's loved ones and colleagues, especially out in Baltimore, wouldn't have that. So therefore I exist, right? Space-time continuum. And I've tried to make the most of that. And sometimes I've had to make too much of that in a way that's been too fast. Like, you have 3 days to move all this stuff. 2001. 2013 also. By then I'm in my 30s. That's a whole other story. That's why I got to keep, you know, my shoulders hurting right now. I've got this like selfie stick thing. Some remnants even earlier this year. Yeah, I'm having trouble going up and down stairs. I might need a couple other medical procedures. So after the trauma at UC Irvine, Engineering Hall of Fame, I couldn't sleep that night. There's all that stress. I was like, what happened? You know, I'm trying to talk it out with my partner room, just, you know, Nima and me. And my body, you know, like the bulging discs and the you know, myofascial tears and pains and the bursitis and the tendinoses. I don't know if those are the right pluralizations as I did a little spit take toward the thing over here. They just hurt even more, right? Because stress, trauma, fatigue. That also could have been mitigated if, you know, I didn't say just like what happened. It's hard for me to do it. Like this, I go up on stage and then there's this award. Okay, I'll get into that. I think I just need to, straightforward. But these are a lot of emotions, and it's not my job to make this easy for anyone. Now, later on, if I'm doing a panel or interview or writing or some other thing, okay, pieces, organize, but I'm just like putting this out there. This is how it be if I'm with each of my, I'm blessed to have many a friend, many a family member, around the world, but I am not going to go through this dozens and dozens of times. This is what happened in 2019 at the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame to me, and since. And this is what happened to me at that wedding in 1990. Even the thing when I was a kid, even the things about like talking about like, you know, family hoarding and evictions and losing the wonderful like all the time. Thought I would just like write a memoir and then, okay, like a lot of people, it's in the memoir and then all these revelations, but we've kind of reached a point where I need to do this now. So, yeah, you know, before the actual ceremony begins where they're going to give the Hall of Fame awards, 2019, not just UC Irvine Engineering, but there was also UC Irvine Physical Sciences and UC Irvine Computer Sciences giving their Hall of Fame awards for 2019. Big hangar in Tustin. Either it was that one or one up the road at El Toro where scenes were shot with me in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek for the 2009 feature film Star Trek. I'm honestly not remembering which of the two hangars, but they're very similar design, both in Orange County. And so clearly bringing back those memories, I'm really excited. And but I'm also nervous. Like I have this weird feeling because I go, okay, it's academia and like movements are fighting hard for social justice in STEM and improving themselves, and you know, like March for Science, and the new ones coming up like Reclaiming STEM and so many others, and so much to be a part of those things that were not easy in past years and things that are just so joyful and profound and meaningful, especially now in the pandemic, and people who are friends for life and some of the most incredible human beings I've ever met. And some of them I haven't met in person. They're on Twitter or this or that. And that's what hurt about that part being cut out of when I'm getting the Engineering Hall of Fame award, and I'll get to that. And I was focused on that for, I think, the subsequent 2 years, and then the pandemic started. And this doesn't seem like such a big deal compared to what everyone's going through, and a lot of people are suffering, losing their lives, frontline workers, doctors, nurses. I've been through worse, is what I'm telling myself, gaslighting myself while I'm feeling like I'm being gaslighted by my alma mater. Coming up, can't do this so many times. Oh, hey, if you're watching this video, then either you saw this posted and you're just watching it, thank you. Especially if you're somebody from my personal life, thank you. If you're somebody I don't know, thank you. Hopefully there's something here in solidarity of some service to you and things you or maybe other loved ones suffer through or are hoping to foster in the world. And if you don't like this stuff, well, explore that. Maybe be nice. Maybe sometimes the challenging issues are ones we actually need to face, but we're not ready. So I'll show love. Maybe you're one of those folks who that's where your struggle is. Or if you're just a hater, well, I'm not going to lose total faith in you, but, in a year where we've had an insurrection of our capital, and my homeland, India, the Supreme Court, and some cases. So why suddenly in the last few weeks this thing from when I was 11, the sexual abuse? I could keep talking. We're already at almost a half an hour here. Well, you can look on my social media. I don't post too often these days, but you could also do research sometime in mid-November. India Supreme Court, and it's on basically sexual abuse being recognized as not requiring physical touch with intimate parts, genitalia. That sexual abuse encompasses a whole range of things. Yeah, I know, that's intense. Sorry I didn't give like a warning to folks on that one, but I hope I've heads up in this video. I may not need to detail what happened to me exactly when I was 11 if you just sort of hear that ruling by the India Supreme Court, which is a fantastic ruling, and the people who had to fight for it, and the plaintiffs, and everybody who has suffered and will suffer in that country and elsewhere, my goodness. If I may say, you have a brother who can relate. Take a moment here. So not only did that story come back to me, flooding to me, it's also like, oh my gosh, a lot of my friends and extended family just don't know about it. I was intending to reveal it in my memoir one day whenever that gets done. Suddenly, in the last few weeks, making references to it on social media. Bam, there it is. Something I may never get justice for. I don't even know if my abuser is even still alive, and even still, like, it's back in 1990, and could the new Supreme Court ruling in India apply to me now? I have no idea. I just hope, like I posted recently, that abuser found some sort of peace, didn't harm anyone else after me. I really hope. I don't know. That racist kid, that white racist kid in Maine when I was 4, cracked my skull. Needed my red sled in July. Called me those names. Expressed anti-blackness and anti-Native American sentiment. Why? Because he and many others in Maine didn't know what kind of Indian I am. New England, Puritans, Thanksgiving, myths, 1980s Ronald Reagan America, Northern Maine. So, you know, I stood in as the other, especially with this dark skin. I'm proud of that. That doesn't mean I know what other folks, people of other ethnic identities and intersections and sexual orientation and gender and abilities and, you know, castes and fates and other things. No, that's not, no one could know or speak for. Did I gain more sympathy as a 4-year-old with the plight of others from those direct actions? Yeah. And instead of trying to stay as an angry fellow, things like Star Trek helped me. A lot of nightmares as a kid, sadness. Those incidents kind of stand out as like that time with that attack and that sexual abuse and that thing at UC Irvine, which I'll get to. I know. I just want to talk about that, but I know I need to. What's more challenging in my life, and I would say in the lives of many others who have faced, you know, abuse, systems of silencing, whether you're being asked to stay quiet or there's this kind of unsaid thing in one's work or family or group to not speak up. Subtle kinds of cues about being a man, getting over it. Oh, your life is good. Oh, you know, you have so much to look forward to. You're working hard. Just stay positive. Don't get bogged down. You know, you don't want to wallow in that. Oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, that's not as bad as this other thing. Oh, others have it worse. Oh, you've dealt with worse. You got to play the game. It's an honor. Just be cool. No. We'll take care of it. We'll make it up to you in this way. How about that? You don't have to do anything drastic. You don't have to get the mic and, you know. I think if some of you, I hope, are watching this, you know I'm talking to you because you did that. Sorry. I'm not trying to say people don't have second chances. Or that they alone are responsible, especially for this thing with UC Irvine engineering. It's institutional. You know, I see it at the very least just being rude and manipulative and unfair to an honored guest. Would you have treated somebody more famous, more wealthy, more powerful, more connected that way? And if you would have you have made it up to them more quickly? Would you have honored your promise of how you were going to make it up to them? if I were of a different political persuasion, if I were donating lots of money to the university, if I didn't also stand for other things that might make some people uncomfortable, but then why would you have invited me, given the award? I thought it was also a sign that your university is saying you value diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, the improvement of society, centering people from marginalized communities, and having honest academic and compassionate conversations about righting the wrongs of the past and seeing how they perpetuate in the present. I know, school board chats, critical race theory, 1619 project, people are, hey, critical race theory is awesome. The 1619 project is awesome. Oh, does that now mean you feel justified to, we don't have to make amends to this guy, financial compensation, apologies, say, hey, why don't you speak at graduation? Why don't you speak at that panel? Oh my gosh, there's a lot more you've been through, and you were wearing a Me Too shirt? I was wearing a Me Too shirt the moment I was on that stage and you were giving me that award. And after, when you told me to stay, and I'm traumatized and I'm angry and I'm confused, but I also am like, it's my alma mater. I don't think you hurt me. Yeah, you're my beloved alma mater. I take the picture with a smile. And you say you're gonna have me do an interview for like your magazine as a way to make it up to me that you didn't mention social justice, a march for science, battles against scientific racism and connecting with, really meaningful hashtags on Twitter like margin sci. During the moment I'm on stage and you're talking out loud about why I'm getting this Engineering Hall of Fame award? You're kidding me. I mean, thank you for talking about my acting and helping my family and being homecoming king and how my acting and my improv and writing does involve STEM. But, then that's a whole other thing we could get into, because as you know, the acting world is risky, financially challenging. There are people who are abusive, and so there's racism there. And people face sexual abuse in that industry, and those are whole sagas with their own blind spots and racism. But in the independent world, it's hard to hold them accountable because they don't have the financial means, and that's painful, and some of you may be watching this. So it did also simultaneously mean a lot to be honored for my acting and writing. But I then learned that it was focused upon instead of the social justice and STEM. And I see it then as your weapon, your institution's weapon, to not honor me for the main reason I was supposed to be honored and why I was there. And what your engineering school and your university is supposed to be celebrating and making more of a promise to stand up for. Now, how did I miss that? Ravi, how did you miss that? And how are you still smiling when you were on stage? Well, the first couple sentences said by the then Dean of Engineering for UC Irvine, who's now, I didn't hear, because I was thanking one of the selection committee members for the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame. We had communicated by email, phone one time. Very busy person, especially that night. I won't say, her name, because while I'm both very hurt by actions of hers that night and a lack of apology and remediation since, it's institutional. And second chances. And also the permanency of saying certain names on this video beyond leaders, right? Chancellors and presidents, you're really public figures. You're ultimately responsible, right? Deans. But at that moment, I'm so thankful to her. And I wanted to tell her on behalf of my family and friends and March for Science and everybody. And then she's like, you should get up there. You're going to miss the rest of your introduction. I'm like, okay, thank you. I go up. So again, I didn't hear the first couple sentences. And so I assumed, that's probably about, social justice and STEM and March for Science. And battling things like environmental injustice and scientific racism and all of that, fighting, to, battle the climate crisis, things like that, right? So I just go with the flow. I'm also been told, be more present, be more mindful. I'm in this setting that reminds me of the hangar of some shuttlecraft scenes in, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. I'm hearing about my acting and about this film premiere, and they're praising my partner, who's my beloved, and she's also in this movie that was premiering that weekend at a film festival in San Francisco, and how my STEM and education advocacy connects to my art. And things about UC Irvine and, accomplishments when I was there. It's just all just really meaningful. I'd also never been given an award for my acting. Not that I expect one, but I'm taking it in. But I had this feeling when it was done. I had this award, smiling, shaking hands. And I walk back down and I look at my table of friends and, my thesis advisor from undergrad for my spacecraft research, Professor Ken Meese, UC Irvine Aerospace Engineering. You are the best. You are the best for being there. And I know this whole thing has turned into this crazy debacle with controversy and trauma, and it connects to some horrible things. You were awesome that night. You've been awesome. And eternal gratitude to you. And always the best to you. You were great when I decided to, quote unquote, leave engineering for acting and education. But I never left engineering. Engineering left me, right? And you sense that. People of color know what I'm talking about. People of color in STEM. I know this. Well, I and many others who are activists in STEM are more a part of STEM now as reformers of it than maybe while in academia or in corporate world or government as quote unquote actual engineers and scientists. What does that even mean anyways? And I wanted to see if UC Irvine and UC Irvine Engineering got it that night and since. That's why I'm being nominated for your Hall of Fame and people are writing letters of recommendation, and then you bring me in and you tell me before I go up on stage that I was a slam dunk, and thank you for what you're doing and for what March for Science and other groups are doing. And, we've expanded your table to fit more people. The dean is going to sit next to you. How would I have known what was about to be manipulated while I was on stage and afterwards? I was in pure trust. Yeah, okay, admittedly my ego's a little boosted, but in thoughtful ways and hopefully well-deserved. So that's why it feels that much more painful. Gaslighting. I drove hundreds of miles when my budget had tightened because I have been doing so much volunteer activism the last few years. That also risked my acting career in the formal sense with agents and the business side where, you're too, outspoken on social justice. And the artistic stuff is great, but it doesn't necessarily pay. And I shouldn't do something for that. Ideally, I love just being an artist and being an activist, but you got to pay the bills. And it's an expensive society, right? And as you heard, my family's been through a lot. Social sacrifices. And then in teaching, can my body keep up with that? Because remember I mentioned those physical injuries? Well, they're being exacerbated by all this stress and all of these things. I don't know if this is connecting. When I thought, how am I going to say this? I'll just say it in a flow. But, maybe this ends up being the video I post. I don't know as I'm doing this. Maybe I do this again tomorrow or the next day. Get some sleep, watch this again or don't. Have therapy tomorrow, see how I feel after that. But if this is the one that I put out there, what's wrong with that? This isn't this is a hearing and you got to say what happened, or Q&A. You have limited time. You have 30 seconds because it's like a TV interview where there's other people on the panel, or there's a lawyer. In those cases, okay. this and this and this when I was 11 in India, or this and this and this when I was 4 in Maine, or this and this and this in 2019, UC Irvine, Engineering Hall of Fame, a few months before I turned 40. Yeah, I know the insecurities about turning 40, and so I thought it was, helping me to look at my life, and that's still young, but you think about things getting older. So it also messed with all of that manipulation in that moment on stage. Oh, why is there still continued manipulation? Okay, here I'm just going to say it. So, I get off the stage with the award, I'm like, okay, felt awesome, but wait a minute. Spidey senses are tingling. Is something off? So I go to the table, my people at my table, they're happy for me. They're just seeing that I'm joyful, and I think they're just going with that, right? But I whisper to my partner, Nima, and to one of my other friends, hold up. Did the dean mention social justice and STEM activism, March for Science, Margin Sci, battling scientific racism, environmental injustice, all those kinds of things? And, they're kind of confused for a second. They're like, we were kind of going with the flow. We were just focusing on your smiles and your vibrancy and just taking in the moment in this whole setting. But they think about it and they're like, I don't think so. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think so either. And I'll just go find the dean and find out, right? Now, the dean, who had been sitting next to me before he went up to introduce me, well, he showed me his clipboard, and there was the text, and he talked to me about how he was practicing pronouncing my, Indian name, right? And said, like, Ravi Valleti, being like Ravi, Valleti, we're close, right? Oh, I'm so honored. Now, I could have looked at the writing. It was like staring at me and saw what the text was for what he was going to say when he introduced me, before being introduced. But I try to be a person of, honor and integrity, respect, and not look carefully at, that's his words, even though it's staring at me. This is also the dean, right? I'm not a student there. I don't work there. I'm not faculty there, but I'm still trying to respect, right? Just like when I was back in school. By the way, what I just said, I'm not a student, I'm not faculty, that I should have been feeling all these years. Why didn't I just speak up? I'm not your student. I wasn't. I wasn't working for you. I wasn't one of your grad students. I went to your university. I love your university. Zot. But you invited me for an award. And is this classist? Because I'm not famous, powerful, so I can be treated and still not, 3 years later, this just hasn't been reconciled by you all? Is it because I speak out about fossil fuel companies, and maybe there was a fossil fuel company sponsoring that event or the School of Engineering at UC Irvine at that time in 2019? Is that too much trying to find too many things to this? But it happens, right? The movements I represent, that's right. I mean, who had so many lobbyists at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland recently? That's the climate conference, the annual, UN-supported climate conference, for those who might not know. I did NASA spacecraft research, but I was uncomfortable with the defense industry. I graduated a few months after 9/11. My graduation speech at UC Irvine made allusions to the imminent increase in wars in the Middle East. The Afghanistan war had started. The Iraq war would start a few months later. This is back in 2002, the 20th anniversary of my graduation and homecoming from UC Irvine. Yeah, that speech was called "Where Are All the Flying Cars?" I was trying to be hopeful about the things we were all hoping for, like a cool sci-fi future, but what is all this? And use your knowledge and your new degrees with integrity and ethics. That was my message to my fellow graduates back in 2002. A message we could still use now more than ever. So let me repeat that. Ethics, right? In STEM, in engineering, in society. I mean, is it that defense contractors, the aerospace industry? You might have had some donors in the room, some powerful people, and so you didn't want to say it out loud. And oh, but Ravi, but it was in the booklet, your stuff about March for Science and activism in STEM, and it was on the website for the, the Hall of Fame. I feel that's gaslighting, though, because why not then say it out loud while I'm on stage? It's also the main reason I was there, why that award would be something that I would deserve from an engineering school, and to further the mission for the people I was representing that day, the people who sacrificed so much, some people who are not here now, right? Because there are threats against activists who fight for human rights and for environmental justice, and to people who are being sacrificed in the pandemic unnecessarily. All these things. It's not about me, right? I was wearing that Me Too shirt. And a sash from my mom that had like Indian print and represented my ancestry. Race, ethnicity. Talked about that today. That's profound. You see the through line of trauma to hopefully triumph, but then more trauma? Oh, people are, what happened? Did you go to the dean and ask? Like, yeah, so I found the dean, right? Well, on the side, the presentations are still going for the, the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame ceremony back in 2019 in that hangar in Tustin. And I go, hey, Dean, I just want to make sure maybe we didn't notice, so I don't want to make an assumption here. Were these aspects stated by you when you were on stage? Like the main reason I'm supposed to be here for the award and the communities I represent? The dean looks at his papers. Nope, and it actually lets me look, and I go, oh. I thank you. You were honest with me. In that aspect. Thank you. But then, oh, it's an honor. Just play it cool. What? You saw. I wasn't taking that. And I thought we can just account for this same evening before I leave, right? Oh, I'll just go to the microphone and just mention that. Oh, no. How about we go talk to this person from the selection committee for your Hall of Fame? I'm like, okay. They've seemed nice. Maybe they can help out. They even said to talk to the communications person who apparently wrote the words to be said by the then dean while I was on stage. I'm thinking, why don't I talk to that person? But okay, I'm going back to the selection committee members who I still could get to know better. Okay. Oh, why didn't I talk to the person writing that script beforehand? Again, I just thought, you know what? Why would I have to worry about those details? I'm just going to go with the flow, trust them. They're inviting me. They're giving me, of all people, this award for this of all topics, right? Social justice and STEM, and what I, mainly do related to engineering, and now what I mainly do, right? Not to say I won't act again. I still write and all that, but this has become more so even than 3 years ago, like, especially in the pandemic, especially as climate crisis gets worse. I'm an activist. I'm an artist activist. I'm a futurist, right? So the then dean takes me over to the selection committee folks. The same lady who, before I went on stage and really inspired by and grateful. The induction moment is over. You were asked not to speak before today, and you are being reminded you won't speak today. And that's it. It was cold. And I was like, oh my gosh. Again, if I were wealthy, powerful, someone else, would I have been treated that way? As a guest for your Hall of Fame. You shouldn't treat undergrads and grad students and faculty like that. You shouldn't. And if you do, and you have to make it up to those folks, well, solidarity, UC Irvine, other universities, other institutions, other companies, other communities, other families where maybe these themes connect, right? Wow. So then I look back at the then dean, like, hey, dean, I still see that microphone's empty. You know me in improv, I could just go, oh no, hold on. Actually, and paraphrase. All this paraphrasing, but they know. Oh, I see the communications representative over there. So, oh, they're like, here tonight? Oh, they're over by the bar. Oh, okay. The dean's like, I'll introduce you. Maybe, you could set up an interview. I'll make it up to you. All right. I'm not that powerful. I love UC Irvine. I'm feeling insecure and exhausted and stressed, but hopeful. I'll play ball. So we go over, we talk to this communications person. And the communications person is like, okay, so what's basically like, what's wrong? And I say, so you didn't mention the following. That's the main reason I'm here. And my perception is that she didn't seem to understand. Hopefully it was just a legitimate misunderstanding and it wasn't like institutional racism or covering up for fossil fuel industry trying to silence me or the defense sector trying to silence me or as a way to like, oh, this is like, I know. You left STEM. No, I didn't. But what if it's just blind spots and kind of a series, like almost like a comedy of errors, but not a comedy? I don't know. These are all questions. Chancellor Howard Gilman, UC Irvine. You were the chancellor then, you're the chancellor now. Lots of questions for you. I may not get them answered, but at the very least, it's still horrible. And because I am who I am, and I stand for social justice in STEM and in the world, and I'm a brown man, it is, I would say at the very least, institutional racism. Let alone rude, manipulative, gaslighting, traumatizing as a survivor of sexual abuse, wearing a Me Too shirt while this is all happening. Are you kidding me? With a sash from my ancestors? With my brown skin? Having survived racial assaults? To be able to be there that night? But then what if it's these other things too? Then the stakes are higher. Your Brilliant Futures UC Irvine Fund has raised over $2 billion. I keep getting those fundraising requests from people. Really? You're asking me for money? I don't have money. I'm an activist. Sacrifice a lot. Also, hi, look what you've all done and not done. You mean money? So you have plenty of money to make it up not only to me, but to other people who may have cases at your university about some sort of silencing or abuse or gaslighting or whatever, whether it's sexual harassment, abuse, racism, ableism, you name it. So to folks out there, not only at UC Irvine, but anywhere, the whole UC system, etc., any university, institution, company, government agency, family, club. I know, it's quite the reckoning right now, right? UC Irvine, you have access to this. You can't just, oh, we have this Black Lives Matter statement and diversity, equity, inclusion. We're going to give awards for it and to people of color, but you're not going to make, really? You have pioneers at your university who stand up for leadership in all kinds of human rights and social justice. So that's the other thing, right? Dr. Kathleen Tressiter, you inspire me. I'm a fan. I also, feel for you and what you voiced in your life that you've been through. The hashtag STEM2. I think that came after the first hashtag MeTooSTEM. MeTooSTEM was on my shirt at the 2019 UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame. But, if I would update it now, it'd be like hashtag STEM2. Yeah, I know. My sexual abuse was when I was 11. It wasn't while I was in academia or STEM specifically, but, well, trigger warning for folks. My abuser, while he was abusing me in one of the pre-wedding events, day 1 of 5 of that wedding in India, 1990 when I was 11, he was asking me about America, about the sports I like, about my middle school's name, and he laughed at the name Bookser. Told me I wasn't Indian enough, but he was also curious and simultaneously praising me, and it was creepy and it was confusing, and I just wanted to be welcomed in India because I had insecurity about that. So I was also talking about my dreams to be an astronaut. Well, I didn't become an astronaut, but I was in the movie Star Trek as an actor. I worked at U.S. Space Camp as a counselor and simulated shuttle mission director. I have degrees in aerospace and mechanical engineering. I did spacecraft research for the wonderful Professor Ken Meese at UC Irvine Aerospace Engineering. You know how hard all of that was when there's a few moments that I can look to out of many where I could have easily held on to a lot of shame about me as an athlete, me as a scientist, as an engineer, as a lover of space. I was just a human, as a brown person, as a dreamer, as a man, masculinity, as a growing in my teens and in my adulthood when it came to like relationships and intimacy. Do you know how all of that just messes that up? I want to swear a couple times, but if kids watch this, I know some of the themes I'm talking about. Oh, can't let kids watch this. Kids go through these things. If you're a child out there and you've been watching this and you know what I'm talking about, you've been through it, I'm so sorry. But I see you. I believe you. If I could support you, if others could support you. Okay? You may not know it. I hope you do. I hope you have it in your life if you don't. There are people in the world who would show you true, honorable, healthy, consensual support, love, joy. And if you don't get to experience that, I hope you do. And if you don't survive to that point, my goodness, I know I'll try to do what I can with whatever days I have. If you haven't gone through these kinds of things, you know people who do. And if you don't know people who do, you know people who do. You do. Sadly, too many of us have these stories. But this particular person so I'm trying to, say to her, this is what I didn't hear from you, and I've got communities who would be hurt, and like, this is why I'm here, and like, what happened. And so I thought, okay, how did you decide what is to be said about me by the dean on stage? So she tells me, I had 4 major sentences to work with. So I looked at your bio, and I really love the arts, and so I focused on that. Engineering, UC Irvine School of Engineering Hall of Fame. Graduate mechanical and aerospace engineering. STEM activist. March for Science. Like, trying to reform engineering for more equity and true diversity and just improving lives in the world. Actor and me, like, thank you, but that's not an acting award. You could have, 2 lines about the STEM activism and March for Science and reforming engineering. Your 2 main lines. That's what I would have done. 3rd line, yeah, talk about the acting and how the acting connects to themes in STEM and the improv, and that there's this film premiere my partner and I are about to have the very next couple days later in San Francisco. Oh, were we so tired for that film premiere after this trauma, the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame in 2019, and the lack of sleep and the stress and the gaslighting and the what? Kidding me? I have to drive all the way back up to San Francisco too, and my body injuries I talked about, those are inflamed. Yes, those are also things. It's just so exhausting. And there's even the in-between. While I was still in Irvine, right? I could barely attend the Fire and Ice. Like, I think it was Conversations and Climate Change, School of the Humanities at UC Irvine, which was the day after my Hall of Fame. I was so looking forward to that. But I was so traumatized and exhausted. So, my partner and I went to like the final session out of a whole day. I made it to that homecoming thing in the middle of the beautiful park, Aldrich Park in the middle of UC Irvine. The Alumni Association, thank you again, the trivia contest. But it was like weird doing that, but I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? I even got the mic at one point to say, I was homecoming king in 2002, and I was here for this Hall of Fame last night. Oh, I could have said all this stuff right then and there, like, you silenced me and didn't honor me and abused me, and I think you're going to make it up to me, but that's why I didn't, because you said you would make it up to me with that interview. So at that time, I'm like, okay. I go to the basketball game. I love basketball. Love UC Irvine men's basketball, UC Irvine women's basketball, the homecoming game. So tired. I left at halftime. You honor me properly in the movements that struggle and sacrifice for STEM and for the world better the night before. I'm not exhausted and traumatized the next day. I get to go to all the events. I get to stay for the whole game. I'm not in so much pain at my movie premiere in San Francisco like 2 days later. And then, now let's fast forward. So, oh yeah, that communications person from engineering, like, after, and then 2 sentences on the STEM activism and 1 sentence on the acting, and then 1 sentence about being like homecoming king, okay, UC Irvine and all this stuff. That's what I would have done. Well, I asked her because I'm like, she still doesn't get it. Maybe, unless it's like a conspiracy about the oil industry and the defense sector and other things of actual direct manipulation and direct overt institutional racism. But if it's not, and I'm taking her word for it, I try to be thoughtful, try to be grateful. And so I try to come up with an analogy, and I say to her, okay, if you had a representative of the Women's March, do you know about the Women's March? I'm trying not to assume. And to my relief and inspiration, she knew about the image. So I say, okay, if you had a representative of the Women's March here tonight, getting an award primarily for her contributions to the Women's March, feminism, women's rights, women's livelihoods, and while that woman's on stage should get that award for those reasons, there's no mention of the Women's March and feminism and women's rights and improving women and girls' lives. And I felt like a light bulb went off for this representative of communications from engineering. And I'm like, okay, now. Immediately, we exchange cards, and then she seems to be on board with what the dean was asking about. Let's do an interview where I really get to talk about my mission, STEM activism, March for Science, etc. I'm still kind of rattled, but I'm like, okay. Now, I go back to my seat, Dean of Engineering, UC Irvine. He does one of the closings, and I'm still hoping, like, mention something about me and the main reason in March for Science and STEM activism, like, make an update, a correction to the audience. Nope, nothing. And what the heck? And the other representative of the selection committee who said I was a slam dunk, he comes up to me after. I start crying with my partner because it's hitting me like this is confusing and traumatizing. And one of my buddies from here in the Bay Area, like, sent me this tweet. Oh my gosh, he's one of my best friends, and he's also in STEM, and is also a person of color and been through stuff. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I wish he were here. Oh, if he, my sister, my mom, like, would they have gotten the mic? Nothing against the friends who were there and my partner, but, we were all more like, okay, we'll just go with the flow and not do civil disobedience, which, looking back on it, we had every right to do that night. That interview never happened. It still hasn't. Oh yeah, let me just say that now, because you're all like, whoa, 3 years later? No. So, oh my gosh. Now, it was a Friday at 6 p.m., Orange County, Southern California, traffic. So understandably, a lot of my friends in Southern California couldn't make it. My sister lives in Baltimore. My parents are older. They've got different, issues. And then other friends who are really versed in social justice and things like that just couldn't make it that night. Some people have kids. Love the friends who they were there for me that night. You were there for me. That also took the racial awakening after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor for some of you who are my friends to really see what happened with me at that UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame thing more clearly. It shouldn't have, but we'll accept it. It's just fascinating, like the alternate universes of what if this person were also there? What if the dean let me take the mic? What if? What if I had truly known this would be this kind of cover-up manipulation thing in the days leading up to the ceremony and insisted that I see the script about what would be said out loud about me? And my hunch was right. You still haven't, right? We're way past that now. I'm crying. This other selection committee member comes over after. I'm trying to keep it just with my girlfriend. I don't want others to see them. I'm like crying for a second. Shut off the tears. I know how to do that. gives me like a flower planter and says, hey, Ravi, you know, you're going to be a big part of this university for years and decades to come. Why don't you take a picture with this and put it on, you know, Instagram after? I'm thinking, in my head, I'm like, not now, what? Really? Really? And I won't say your name either because you're one person and I think it's institutional second chances, but you haven't made it up. None of you have. I'm just hurt. And it's manipulative. And I'm wearing a Me Too shirt. And I have representing my ethnicity and race. And also, hi, as an activist leader, we get threats. So do you know that all of this also doesn't help? When those of us fighting for these things, and if you're gonna invite somebody to honor them for such important topics, you have to do right by them, especially people of color, especially people fighting for social justice and civil rights and a better world. Or be upfront. We will invite you under these terms. We will honor you under these terms. We will gaslight you. We will only mention these other things. We won't make it up to you. We have donors we have to, I don't know, just actually, why don't you just own it if those are the reasons? But if those are not, and it's really now just kind of snowballed into, oh my gosh, we actually like had blind spots and it was like a bad comedy of errors and we didn't mean to, and oh, we just didn't have the skill. What about your diversity training? Okay. Own it now. Make it up to me now. Okay? I know the stakes of that have gone up, but hey, y'all have raised more than $2 billion in your other fund. Part of that should be to make it up to people you wronged, especially people of color, and on issues of health and safety and trauma and abuse. You need to. What are you asking for, Ravi? How much money? Did I say on here? Is that what it's about? It's not even about money either, really, honestly. Okay? I just don't see any other way now, because way past that interview thing, would you have me speak at the UC Irvine Engineering graduation commencement in June 2022? That'd be awesome. 20 years later, I gave the speech for mine back in 2002. But maybe you're like, oh, this is awkward, and it's going to be a long healing process. And for me, I might be like, yeah, it's going to be a long healing process. But I want to go to my reunion, even though I'm like nervous about interacting with people. It's still a pandemic, and put the mask on, and Omicron or Delta, whatever. I'm boosted, but you know, other people. How do I talk to people with everything I've been going through and now realizing about my life and revealing? Well, I can say, just watch this video. If you really want to know things, you know. Maybe you saw me at the reunion. You haven't. We lost touch. You didn't know all this stuff about me, and you're watching this now because I was like, I'm not going to talk to you about all these things at the reunion, but can you watch this video later? If you're watching it now, thank you. And if there's something of yours that you couldn't share with me or was too much in real time, and hopefully I can read or watch, or, you know, it's a lot, right? Especially after the pandemic, we can set boundaries with people and like the way we want to share or not share, or we don't have to share. What happened to you, Ravi? Why does your body hurt? What happened when you were 11 with that uncle? What happened? We say uncle, he's not like a relative. Just a cultural thing, just make that clear, because there's relatives. Oh, which relative? No, not a relative. Old friend of my father's. Ooh, I just learned that recently. Betrayal, I was a pawn. Trigger alert. I feel sexual assault was the weapon, and I was like the sex toy? Is revenge against my father? I know my father's made some mistakes, but really? No. I was 11. Even if I were an adult, no. Wearing a Me Too shirt. Engineering. While I was abused, I was put facing other children at that wedding event. And there's a conversation happening. That conversation I talked about my middle school and about my dreams to be an astronaut. And I don't know if those kids could tell what was happening to me. Trigger alert under my shirt. And I ran away. I cried for hours in like a kind of an outhouse where it was at least private. First world privileges, you know, hole in the floor kind of bathroom in India, still trying to get used to it, living in America, spoiled with, you know, 1990. But I never complained about such a bathroom ever again after that, because I could at least be alone and cry for 2 hours in that wedding venue or whatever. Long weddings, multiple days. For people who don't know about that, in a lot of like traditional kind of Indian weddings and this and that. the then dean of UC Irvine Engineering, me in front of an audience. I think I'm being celebrated and welcome to share who I am through what is being said about me. But looking back on it, I feel now like I'm also being puppeteered and abused and used simultaneously while I'm wearing that Me Too shirt. And it really reminds me of, see, that I've been realizing the last few weeks. Whoa. And then only a couple weeks ago, I learned that abuser in 1990 like knew my dad and they were friends and it was revenge. I just thought he was like a random uncle at the wedding all these decades. This is a lot, right? And no, UC Irvine, you are not responsible for what happened to me when I was 4 in Maine by that racist bully attacking my cranium with the Kit from Knight Rider, or that sexual abuse when I was 11. That's not saying that, but you didn't help. Also, none of you besides like really close friends asked, "How are you, Ravi?" I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't have asked like, "What happened to you? Why are you wearing a Me Too shirt?" But, those of you on the selection committee, the former dean, other people at that UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame 2019 and since, like, "Hey, Ravi, like, are you okay? Is there anything we can do?" I could say, "No, thanks. Like, resources, this and that." What? In addition to everything I've been talking about, just the basic humanity. That breaks my heart. Snowballs, doesn't it? There's people who do way more than me when it comes to social justice and trying to reform STEM and just society. Oh, man. Chancellor, the other reason I'm invoking you directly, well, I don't know if you were there that night in 2019 at the UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame. And I don't know if you heard about what happened and didn't happen that night and over the next few months until I emailed you a year later, February 2020. So you've also known that I've been seeking a dialogue for some sort of remediation, reconciliation. What is the process here? Is there something I haven't thought of that actually is outside the box with your incredible creative minds, people at your university and all kinds of fields of academia, some who've been most inspiring professors for me, from arts, humanities, sociology, social ecology, you name it, arts, engineering, biological sciences, earth sciences, physical sciences, math. I know I'm just naming them all, but your inclusion departments that you think opened and expanded since that Hall of Fame for the university and then at engineering, equity, inclusion, access, those kinds of things. Right? Like I said, it's not just about financial compensation. I can't think of anything at this point. And yes, there's been a pandemic, and I feel for so many of you and your loved ones and all the students at the university who've had challenges with remote learning and all of so much displacement. Even I thought during the height of the pandemic, this issue with my alma mater can wait. It's not as important. So I didn't keep pushing after that email in February 2020. That was thoughtful. Were you under orders to have me be treated the way I was and then not have the interview follow-up actually happen? If the people became uncomfortable to face me because of guilt or whatever, your team should have come up with an alternative way to make it up to me. But then that's not you if you're under orders, or there's donors or the oil industry or defense. I have no idea. I'm just back to you, Chancellor Howard Gilman. You were the chancellor. You're still the chancellor. Okay? And I emailed you in February 2020, so then you directly knew and you heard from me. And yes, there's been this horrifying pandemic, but also, pandemic, science and engineering activists. Remember that whole thing? So what, this year, 2021, it took the reunions part of UC Irvine emailing me to ask me to maybe help them prepare for my upcoming reunion, which is really sweet. And theoretically, I'd want to, Maybe they didn't know about all this that I've been talking about, but clearly if this isn't resolved, how am I going to comfortably help with my reunion, or should I? And then I say, hey, glad to hear from you. I'd be willing to help, but also can this other thing be resolved finally? I've been waiting since early 2019. And then what, a couple months later, the virtual reunion kickoff, September 14th, I think it was, 2021, like a couple months ago, I'm not allowed in? I'm like, seriously? After all of this stuff with what happened at my UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame and all these requests for, and all the promises to make it up, that's just cruel. Really? I miss people. I want to reconnect with you. I miss my, like, the social event connected to my, oh man, that's just mean. Okay, and if, I thank the Alumni Association for telling me that somebody was like let go, and I've been getting bigger university, and then engineering. Okay, so you have a new dean as of a few months ago, like a permanent dean. And I'm thinking, you weren't even the dean back in 2019. I hope you're doing well there. You recently said in the newsletter that I thankfully get, the beginning of this month, that you felt welcomed, and even though from what I hear, you may be ultimately responsible with this process I'm asking for and deserve, and I shouldn't have to ask for, you also weren't the dean. You just got to UC Irvine a few months ago. And not all the people involved in what I see as systemic abuse against me worked or work for engineering specifically at UC Irvine, representing parts of the whole campus, the whole university. So again, back to you, Chancellor Howard Gilman. I want you to follow up, okay? If you're having engineering, take care of this. I would also hope the University of California Board of Regents, the UC president, Michael Drake, hello, former chancellor of UC Irvine. I think we met briefly at a chancellor's club function. I've talked about some really horrifying traumas. I'm, dealing with intensive therapy. I've got some more medical procedures coming up too. Like, there's a lot. And hi, 2022 midterm elections. Whatever your political preferences, whoever's listening to this, like, democracy's at stake. Literally, that's no exaggeration. Climate crisis, the pandemic. So many issues, but I'm gonna be a little busy. Other activist leaders, we're gonna be busy. We have a lot on our shoulders. I need to focus on that. Can I also get back to acting and finishing my book and having more joy in my life? I really deserve that. I really want that. I don't feel selfish anymore asking for that, or like, it's not as bad as this other thing. Like, come on. I'm going to end with, I didn't mention this earlier just because there's so many pieces to this. I know it's hard for me to tell this chronologically. And you know what? Why should I in this? Why should I in this format right here? Thank you all for listening and bearing through it. But just, why not? I could go over in my head how many times to practice and prepare and write a script, and this is the order of events and do it. No, maybe this is the one time I do this, and this is just how it is. And the next, panels, Q&As, interviews, if it's formal, legal, I can just more straightforward. I'm also an artist. I'm also just a human being. And this is a gift. I didn't have to share this on video. I could have just said, try to read my artistic writings about all this and interpret it, and maybe it doesn't come across clearly, but that's my right. Instead, I made the time for this, okay? And I appreciate those of you making the time to watch this. I want to end with something that's kind of in the middle of these events since my 2019 UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame. And that is going back to the shirt, the Me Too shirt, and the sash from my ancestors, from my mom, from India. My big curly hair at the time. Ancestral hair. Brown. South India. Dravidian. Ontario, Canada. Maine and New England. Bay Area, Southern California, all these things. So yeah, there wasn't that interview in 2019, right? I mentioned that. But suddenly I'm getting these messages from friends who are visiting UC Irvine in late 2019 or still work there and are friends of mine. And thank you all too for listening to me all these years, being of support. Some of you in engineering, who weren't like on the selection committee or communications, who were my friends going to back in the day, who retired or still work for UC Irvine Engineer, like, thank you as well. Much love. I know this probably hasn't been easy for you because it's like, this, like family secrets and tea spilling and stuff just coming out in the open that's not totally comfortable. But you also care about me. You care about the mission for social justice and people of color. And for your students. Late 2019, I'm getting these pictures from campus, and there's these giant banners at engineering at Gateway Plaza above my old research lab, the Flight Dynamics and Control Lab. Hi, Professor Meese again, and the team. And it's a huge banner of each of the 2019 UC Irvine Engineering Hall of Fame inductees, including one of myself. Now, normally the artist in me, a public figure, a little bit enjoying the spotlight, okay, would have loved that. Such an honor to, really. It horrified me further. Not only was it like, you didn't give me the interview, but you're tokenizing me? And then there's a picture of that in a diversity book from engineering that I'm getting in the mail, but there's, you mentioned March for Science now and actively, you're not like interviewing, like getting in, you didn't, I feel tokenized. That's where I feel like the puppetry is re-traumatized, is recirculated from when I was 11 in India. I know it's not the same story, it's not the same kind of abuse, but I'm wearing a Me Too shirt. And it gets expanded into that giant banner. That did not make it up to me. That actually kept me silenced. Is that what your institution wanted and still wants? That's not right. It made it worse. It's very traumatizing. Oh, I could keep going. I'm so tired. And there's probably other aspects to this. Yeah. Another reason I think it's so hard to talk about all this is like there is so much going on in the world, and I've had so much joy and so much to be thankful for, and the fear of being identified just as sexual abuse survivor, racial attack survivor, this guy who had this weird thing happen with his Hall of Fame award and all this other stuff. Like it's not generally what survivors want, but I have somewhat of a voice. I think it's needed to be said just so it's like, hey everybody, this is what happened. I'm not going to tell this over and over. And there was one other thing I wanted to say. Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot. Just let me be for a second, actually. Like, I could hit stop here and say, I'll think of it and tell you later, but I actually just want you to just be with me right now in this moment, all of you. Thank you. And yourselves, take a moment. Let's go around. There's the old Little League field here, right? Yeah, I stopped playing baseball. After that sexual abuse. I love baseball. The next year's coach kind of gave me creepy vibes. And even if it wasn't like that kind of creepy vibes, like that uncle in India, I was in such a self-defensive protective mode, 6th grade, middle school. And I'm just like, nah, I don't know. Maybe I need to do something different. And so I played more basketball and met new friends, had some old friends I could trust, but trust, right? That's a whole complicated thing. Yeah. Oof. It's dizzying. It's just all so much. Well, yeah. Let's see what we can do, okay?